Hello everyone, my name is Alicia Jackson, licensed professional counselor, and welcome to my channel. Today we are reviewing Finding Me, a memoir by Viola Davis. If you are new to my channel, welcome. And of course, I'm going to ask you to please subscribe, like the video if you're enjoying this content, and of course comment below to join in on the dialogue. I normally review documentaries, and for those of you who are part of my audience of reviewing Married at First Sight as well, to help us learn about relationships. And at the same time, this book was highly recommended. When I say highly recommended by a loved one. And so I began to take in her story, and my goodness, I said, I have to review this. And so we're here reviewing the book. It is 17 chapters. Of course, I'm going to go into great detail. If you have not read the book, then spoilers will be in this video. They will definitely be in this video. Viola's story is so powerful. It's so powerful. And I recommend this book to anyone when I think it's a wonderful read. And I also definitely recommend that Black people read this book, because yes, our story is not a monolith in this country, and at the same time, the lessons that sometimes in the experience that comes from our varied experiences is so telling, and you see it in the story, and specifically for Black women. So much rich stuff in this book. And I can't wait to dig in. So let's do it, because I'm belaboring the point. Let's get into it. First off, the one thing that truly impressed me about this book, and it really spoke to me and my system, was her authenticity. The fact that she gave us the real Viola. She didn't give us the shined up Viola that she wanted other people to see. She gave us her real, raw, true story. And I was just at times moved to tears. At times my breath was taken away. It was an experience. Also, the other thing that I really enjoyed about this book was, on top of her being true and authentic to her story, the way she communicated. Right? The raw language. She was herself. Like she obviously cusses, right? She uses profanity, and she did not shy away from it. She was true and real in her story. She talked about like the true journey of becoming an actor, and how, people will say, well, yeah, if you don't want that role, then don't take that role. Wait for the one that works for you. And she's like, that's privilege. Those people who speak that they have the privilege to do so. And when you're an up and coming actor, you take what you can get, because you take work, and because you need to feed yourself, that's what you do. And I just really truly appreciated it. It was like very grounding to read her book because of the language and because of her realness. It was just a very grounding experience. Sometimes I guess because of the era of social media, there's just like this razzmatazz that can happen, this phoniness, that everything's great, everything's awesome. Look at this picture, look at this, I'm having a great time over here, and nobody really truly tells their real, true, authentic story. And my goodness, she did that for us in this book. Really enjoyed about this book was her journey with her parents, and how she talked about her parents as if they were real people. And of course you're saying, Alicia, of course they're real people. But what I mean is, she was able to take in their complexity, the complexity of her mother, the complexity of her father, and able to talk about each of them through her different stages of her life, and be able to talk about how her experiences of them helped to shape her, but also how she was able to see them and their story, and able to work through her internal conflicts, specifically with her father and his physical violence, his physical violence against her mother, that was definitely very terrifying and traumatic for her as a child and defining for her as a child. And also how she was able to see her father transform into this very loving person at the end of his life, or towards the end of his life. So the book opens up with Viola at 8 or 9 years old, and she is talking about the trauma of being bullied, the trauma of poverty, and the trauma of her home life, and how she protected herself. She protected herself by being this very feisty fighter, this runner, having this attitude, and also this competitiveness. These were ways that she helped to navigate through this. And she talked about growing up in predominantly white areas, and her of dark complexion and being poor was bullied constantly and had to run from school constantly, and having that fear is just the fear that she dealt with in her life on a regular basis is just astronomical. It's mind-blowing, and a part of me feels like really unsettled to say this, and at the same time she even said it that her journey through all the trauma that she experienced, when it came to her coming to the realization that she wanted to be an actress, and how she was going to these classes through Upward Bound, and they were saying like, hey, being an actor and being an actress is difficult and it's hard. And she's like, yeah, hard, that's my life, I've done that. I don't think there's anything you can do to scare me away from this or try to pull me away from this, because this is my life. This is what I've done. I've done survival. Survival is my everyday life. And that was really what I feel was able to like help her to push through to where she is now as an actress, because she just kept going. She just kept going. She just kept fighting. She said, like, I was so terrified at night. I was peeing in the bed, and I was going to school with smelling like urine, and I've survived without food, and I wake up to horrible things happening in my home on a regular basis. That is my everyday life. So being able to push through that awful journey to become an actress. And the funniest thing about the book was her performance to Juilliard. Her performance in Juilliard was hilarious, because it was like, because she was so unaware of the process, right? Everything was new to her. She wasn't in the circles, right? She was just a poor black girl from Rhode Island, right? And so she's like, I got to pay bills. That's my concern, paying bills. And that was just so relatable, that sometimes people don't understand how the priorities are when you are surviving and you're just worried about like food, water, shelter, that everything else becomes secondary. Even an audition to get into Juilliard becomes secondary, because I got to get back home, because I got a show and I got to pay my bills. So are you going to see me or not today? Right. And I'm sure to them, it maybe even came off as like confidence, but she rocked it and she got in. But it was just that survival was just, again, instinctively in there. And while it was just heartbreaking to hear her story, and no, none of these things should have happened, right? No child needs to be in the type of environment that she was in. House fires, numerous house fires, rats and physical violence, all of it. And it helped her. It truly helped her to say, I know that this is hard, but every single day of my life has been hard. So I think I can do this. In a roundabout way, her trauma gave her this weird confidence to be able to like push through all the obstacles that were going to come her way. Even though, because of the trauma she experienced, there was a lot of self-doubt, and there was a lot of unresolved like self-esteem issues that she experienced, being called ugly and being called the N-word over and over again, and throwing things at her and yelling slurs at her. And she described the feeling of being hunted every day when she was being chased by bullies and running barefoot and on snowy days. Could you imagine just running barefoot? It was just her story. Okay. So much detail, so much. And she also talked about the shame that those situations created, the shame of poverty and being black, like just not being seen, like having those two things be on her made her feel so unseen that it pushed her to use this competitive edge to do well in school. She talked about the competitions that her and her sisters put on and these talent competitions to really be seen, like that pushed her. The shame pushed her to be seen. And it's like, there's so much just complexity in that, because somehow our brains, and I say this all the time, our brains are so protective, and it is resourceful where it will utilize things. It will utilize things to help us push through survival. It will. It truly will. Viola talked about her journey through therapy. She didn't really go into great detail in it, but she did talk about how her therapist really had almost kind of like this very indignant demeanor, the way she described it, as she was really trying to heal this 8-year-old version of herself, because she was still showing up in her life, which is truly often, as you know, through internal family systems. That's the type of therapy that I utilize, that is truly what happens. When you experience pain or trauma in your life and the period it happens, there's a part of you that stays with you and stays with you present in your body. And when activated, shows up at whatever age it happened. And she was trying to heal this 8-year-old. And her therapist said, that 8-year-old is fine. She's a survivor. You can hug her, but let her hug you. And while I have some, parts of me disagree with what he's saying, and at the same time, the love relationship between the inner child and self is so necessary for healing. And it was great that he encouraged her to build that relationship. And at the same time, the little caveat I would add is that 8-year-old Viola, yes, she's a survivor, and she needs to learn that the tools that she was using to survive, that she doesn't have to use those anymore. And that's okay. But yes, nothing's wrong with her, but she just doesn't have to utilize those same tools to survive, and trust Viola to keep her safe. Viola shared the story of her parents and her birth and how she came to be, and her siblings, and even her mother's story for being bullied by a teacher for being dark skinned, and that being really one of the reasons why she stopped going to school. And I think it was so important for her to share the experience of colorism, because it is truly a byproduct, right, of slavery and the racism in this country, and the experience of it and how much it affected her life and the journey of her life. This impacted her mother's education. This impacted her self-esteem and how she saw herself, that she didn't hear that she was beautiful until she went to that Upward Bound program, and this man told her and her sisters that, yes, you are beautiful, and finally saw her. Her dark skin made her feel unseen, and made her feel ugly, and it made her feel like she was supposed to stay in this box, as she talked about later in the book, and how the role in How to Get Away with Murder completely transformed her life. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but she painted this beautiful picture of her mother and her mother's story, and her mother had this heavy guilt of taking care of her siblings at a very, very young age, at the age of 3, and feeling responsible for her younger sister's death, who died in a house fire. And all I could think about as Viola was sharing her story is that all those house fires that they experienced throughout her life, I can only imagine that those house fires activated her mother's trauma, triggered her, that 3-year-old self, and then all the abuse that she experienced from the hands of her husband, and also her being a survival of SA, because we can't say the word. And on top of that, she painted this very complex picture of her mother, of being this survivor, of going through these horrific experiences over and over and over again. But yes, she was a fighter. She stabbed this little boy with a crochet needle who was bullying Viola. She was an activist, and she was fighting for the rights of Black people. She fought for her daughter Danielle, who was inappropriately touched by this man in the store, and everybody was just okay with it. And she fought to get justice, even though punishment was very, very lenient. She still was a fighter. She was a fighter, and she loved hard. She loved her family so hard. And there was this love affair. There was this beautiful love affair between her and her mother. Unfortunately, what happens often is children who do witness their parents in distress, their childlike mind tells them that they are responsible to take care of them or to keep them safe. And she definitely took on that responsibility. And you could see that even when she was asking her mother, like, did you ever get some joy out of your life? She asked, like, did you have an affair, outside of the marriage, to try to just have some experience of joy? And her mother said that she had fell in love with a gynecologist once, because she had feelings, for a man who cared for her. She had feelings for a man who cared for her, but you could just tell there was a part of Viola that really, really wanted her mother to have a better life, wanted better for her, and thank goodness was able to give her some of that because of her success. In sharing her mother's story, Viola said this quote, and I had to write it down. One of the beauties of getting older is really getting to know your parent. And that really stuck with me, just because as a therapist who is working with families and seeing the distance, the emotional distance that oftentimes happen in the parent-child relationship, it can be heartbreaking. Oftentimes, children don't really know their parents, who they are. They just know their experience of them. For whatever reason, maybe it be what their parents have experienced. Maybe there's some strain in the relationship. And to be able to get space or have space for her to be able to really know her mom and know her story, because she was fortunate enough that her mother has lived a long life, it was just beautiful to see that. Oftentimes, parents unknowingly create an emotional distance between them and their children because of the trauma they've experienced. There's protection that they have built up that has kept them safe, right? That they're not going to be vulnerable with their children, to have that space of intimacy with their children. And so it was great that Viola was able to ask those questions and get those answers, so she can really know her mom and have that relationship. She also shared the complicated story of her father. My goodness. Her father. She described him as more of a simple man, and said he had a strained relationship with his stepfather. He had a second grade education, and he learned how to read when he was 15 years old. He was also physically abused, and he worked as a horse groomer. And Viola said she loved going to work with her father. I imagine that it was a place that she found safety with him and was able to connect with him. Viola described her father as having two really big protectors in his life, which was rage and alcoholism. And she talked about how on payday he would get very upset because he was working so hard but still not able to get the respect that he wanted. He was still abused by his superiors at work, and then could not provide adequately for his family. and he soothed himself, Viola said, by having affairs with multiple women, and also, of course, by the physical violence towards her mother. Viola shared that she was even present for one of the situations where her father was being unfaithful with her mother, and she told on her father. She told on her father because she was loyal to her mother. She told on her father, and that caused a huge explosion. Viola shared an account after an account of all these traumatic experiences. The night where her father was stabbed, the nights that he was drunk and was lashing out at her mother, and then also Central Falls. And Central Falls, Viola stated, was the cocaine capital, and how she survived was through achievement. She was achieving at school, doing well, while dealing with house fires and rats and wars with other tenants in the home. She was constantly juggling more than any child should ever have to juggle at that age, and still persevering and achieving. It's miraculous. It's miraculous, the obstacles that she has had to overcome. Viola talked about the first time she saw Cicely Tyson on television and how it just spoke to her that another black, dark-skinned woman with dark-skinned black features was on television, and it gave her the light switch. It gave her the go switch that, hey, I can do this. And it really showed just how important the power of representation is, how truly important seeing that someone else that looks like you doing something that you want to do makes you know, like, oh, I could do this. I could do this. And it creates a realm of possibility so that you can have the fortitude to push through the journey that it takes to get to where you want to go in life. To her building the life that she wanted for herself. And it was truly beautiful for everything to come full circle. For Cicely Tyson to play her mother was just a beautiful full circle moment for her. I can't imagine how it felt for that to happen, and how she was able to just let her know how great of an inspiration she was for her. Viola Davis also talked about the sobering, uncomfortable truth of how common SA was back then, and still unfortunately is, and how her mother was, she was, her sisters were, and her brother assaulted them, and the constant physical abuse, seeing her sister bleed from her head, all of these things, like, she saw and witnessed so much. And it's a horrific truth. It's a sobering truth. You know, I don't shy away from the hard stuff, because life is too real for that. Life is too real for that. And the more we talk about it, the more we'll be able to hopefully continue to give space for people who have experienced it to be able to be honest about what's happened to them. And it's so common. It oftentimes, we know, happens in families. It happens with people that we know. And you talked about at a young age hearing, and even her mother heard this, that, hey, this is just what men do. It's just what men do. He just touched the girls. It's just what they do. And it's not okay. It's not okay. I'm glad that there are more conversations about consent, and hopefully we can continue to keep this conversation going. That consent is very important, and making sure that a touch that you give someone else is a wanted touch and not a boundary that is being crossed. One of the things that I noticed as she was developing herself creatively as a actress is she was given scripts, and she would say, this isn't believable. How can I make it make sense to me? And again, there's just something that's just so authentic about Viola. Like, she she's like, this isn't believable. Let me try to make it believable for me. Let me try to fully understand why a character would do this or why a character would show up in this way. And her experiences, again, her lived experiences, help to give her that sobering reality, even on the help, when she said, no, those women would have took that money. They would have took that money. They would not have not taken that money. And so like she was able to utilize that live experience to show up and fuel her drive and her raw emotion. Like her raw emotion, she was just able to display her humanity on the screen for us to see what it's like, what it really feels like, and to really give an authentic portrait of what it means to be a Black woman, right, today in society. I want to keep this video short. It's so much to talk about in this book because of 17 chapters. But I want to talk about Viola's journey to motherhood and how it was not a straight line, right? She became pregnant and she decided to end the pregnancy because she did not want to become a mother. She did not want to relive this cycle. Like she was so determined not to do this, not to do that. And she went through a depression after that. She talked about the reproductive health history of her family and how the women struggled with fibroids, and she herself had to have a hysterectomy, and all the while her career was like on the upswing and wanting to have children, but also not wanting the pressure of that, and adopting her daughter as well, and how that was just a beautiful journey for her. And she was able to work through her own trauma so that she could be present for her daughter Genesis. It was just a beautiful journey. And unfortunately, Black women are twice as likely to have uterine fibroids, and 1 out of 4 women usually have uterine fibroids and need to have a hysterectomy, and Black women are twice as likely to do so. And so I think it was just beautiful for her to share that story with us. Also, I cannot talk about Viola Davis' story without talking about Julius. Julius. I have a huge appreciation for him and how he showed up in her life. Viola was not protected. Viola Davis' experience as a child growing up she was not protected. And Julius was truly a protector. She talked about how he was so concerned about her safety at all times, and so concerned about giving her direction and guidance to know, like, hey, this is the financial decision. Like, you need to get life insurance on your parents, Viola, because they're taking care of their grandchildren, and that's gonna wear on their health. And she was outside and she honked the horn and he came out with a baseball bat. Like, he was just he was so protective and so sweet to her. It was truly a gift. And she talked about how she prayed for him exactly, and he was exactly what she prayed for. And it was just a beautiful journey to hear that, and a beautiful gift for her to receive from all the things that she had been through in her life. Another thing that Viola Davis highlighted in the book was when she had this dream before she married Julius, and she had a dream that she was like asleep, or this part was dead. And that really sunk in, like that hit me because oftentimes I think we focus on the grief of death and loss, or even in the grief of relationships when they end. But grief is also very important for the periods of life that ends, and marriage and death of singleness is a real thing. It's a huge thing, especially in how it plays out in the relationship. And the fact that Viola had that insight to really see, like, oh my goodness, this part of me is gone. This part of me this part of me will no longer be. This part of me will no longer be. I will no longer be this single woman. I'm now a wife. I'm now joined with another human being. This is a completely different transformation that's going to be happening in my life, and there's no turning back from this. Like, won't ever be the same. Like, even if a marriage ends, right, you're able to be single again, but it's still different. That experience has shaped you. That experience has changed you. And that happens with motherhood. That happens for men as well, in becoming a husband and a father. It happens when, each period, and even throughout marriage, as the marriage continues to grow and people continue to grow together, there are periods of times that are grieved, and you have to grieve those periods and accept where you are, so you don't find yourself trying to relive what happened long ago, but you accept where you are and create moments there. So I thought that was really great for her to highlight that in this book. Viola also shared with us how she made peace with her father, how she forgave her father, and how she had to walk him through the last breaths of his life. Oh my goodness, it was such a beautiful story for her to give her father that gift of forgiveness, and for her to be able to give him peace, to be able to pass on. Death and grief is something I talk about a lot, and I've shared my story as well, but it's such a complex thing. It's such a heavy thing, and it's such a real thing. And it was just great for her to share that with us. Last thing I want to highlight is her role in How to Get Away with Murder. Whew. Like, she made sense of that character, which we talked about earlier. Like, she made sense of that character. She used her mother as a muse, and changing her name. She used her lived experiences and talked about how it was to play this powerful Black, dark-skinned woman who was a sexual being and a complex character. She had her own trauma. She was very intelligent. She almost had some sociopathic ways, right? She was just, while she was traumatized and using alcohol to medicate herself, she also was like, hey, this is what we have to do. If we have to kill somebody, that's what we have to do. And she was like such a rich experience for her to play such a rich character, but it was also so humanizing to see a Black woman play that character. The most powerful scene for me on that show was Cicely Tyson doing her hair. And she talked about how she wanted that character to have her wig pulled off, and how that just to braid her hair, it's a very universal experience. It's a very universal experience that most Black women have had to sit between their mother's legs and have her do her hair. That's a very universal experience, and it just humanized us. To say, like, yes, we were little children who had to get our hair done, because Black women have been dehumanized. Black people have been dehumanized and still are for so long. And so to have that story be told on television and to see it, and her to own it with her authentic nature, and it was a beautiful thing. I'm glad that she was able to utilize her story to make the story even more real, and for her to also even get healing. Viola Davis gave us a great gift by giving us her story. She didn't have to do that. Her story carries so much shame. I could only imagine, of wetting the bed till she was 14 years old, of having rats in her house, and all of this, the domestic violence of her father and the fear of him being judged right by the court of public opinion, all of that. She gave us that story to give us a gift. Not that we have to live life how Viola Davis lived it, but for us to be able to know that that even though we see the glamour, we see the awards, all the awards that she has won, all the accolades that she has received, and the achievements, all of it. When you see that, you just look at Viola Davis, you're like, wow, she's amazing. And you put her on a pedestal. But when she shares us her story, when she gives us that gift, it puts her here, and we say, wow, she's just like us. And hey, maybe I can do it too. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what for you was inspiring in her story. Finding Me, there's so much stuff. It was a 17 chapter book. I know I'm going to have a horrible time editing this video because there was so much to say, and I didn't want to leave things out. But I also just wanted to thank, I know she's probably not going to watch this video, but I definitely want to extend my gratitude for her sharing her story with us. And of course, if you got anything out of the content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and as always, be cool, be calm, be centered. Peace.